Okay, here we go.
So now it's time to feed the big tank, including my big Oscar cichlid.
Oh my.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Troy from Cichlid Bros. In today's video, Quinn and Alec are going to join me as we feed all of our different cichlid aquariums, showing what we feed, how often we feed, what types of food and what brands we use, in all of our different cichlid tanks. Between the three of us, we have a lot of aquariums, but in today's video, we're only going to stick to the cichlid tanks and showing what we feed to each of those. If you keep any of the same cichlids or similar types of cichlids, this should hopefully be really helpful for you if you're just looking for more information and maybe tips on what you should be feeding your own cichlids. We're going to start with Alec, then kick it to Quinn over in his classroom, and then we're going to finish the video here in my basement with my 6 cichlid tanks, so make sure you stick around to the end so you don't miss that. So I'm going to pass it over to Alec to start us off.
Alright guys, so we're going to feed my 125 gallon Predator half tank. And what I typically do is I will mix Extreme Big Fella, which is 3mm pellets, with Extreme Monster pellets, which are 9mm. And I will use the lid to kind of help me measure out how much I do. And so you can kind of see there, I kind of fill up one little layer with the 3mm and I sprinkle the 9mm on top. So these are pretty big fish. They like the big pellets. Once in a while I will also feed them a treat of the jumbo krill or some type of frozen food. Alright, so here we go with their daily dose of extreme pellets. When you're feeding fish as big and aggressive and ravenous as these guys, they do tend to make a mess, to make your tank really cloudy, and also splash big waves out of your tank. So it's best to drop the food and close the lid as soon as you can. So here we go. Alright, so now that we've fed these guys, let's kick it over to Quinn and feed some of his aquariums.
Hey, what's up guys? Quinn here. So I'm in my classroom, and as you can see, I feed my cichlids a variety of different foods. So there's definitely some foods that my fish prefer more than others, but I would say the number one most important thing with feeding your cichlids is to have a variety of different foods in their diet. So let's go see how I feed these guys. All right, so these are the 3 main sources of food that I feed my cichlids. You can see they're all from Extreme Aquatics. So I would say the big fella pellets are the normal, and then these two here are more for variety. All right, so here is about the amount that I feed them. This is 2 healthy pinches of the big fella pellets, and then 1 healthy pinch of the flakes. You can see they're getting ready there. Try to spread it out as evenly as possible so they're not all going at the same location. As you can see, the silver dollars are ravenous. Convict rarely comes out of his cave until the lights get turned off, so just know he's there. All right, so here's Felix, big Bertha here. When she sees me feed the other tanks, she gets pretty upset, but also pretty excited. Let's see, she's already coming up to the tank. I like to feed her some actual krill. They're pretty big, but she can handle it and do it as a treat sometimes, so let's see if she can do that. Being a little shy. All right, here's some big fella pellets. That's her go-to. Girl loves to eat. All right, so in terms of feeding frequency, obviously as a high school teacher, I'm only here Monday through Friday. So I never feed them over the weekend. I've never had any problems with this. Those 2 days break is not bad because it keeps the nitrates low, keeps your parameters in check, and also just keeps the fish hungry. I think a hungry fish is a healthy fish. Remember, these are animals that are used to being hungry in the wild. So I've had long breaks like Christmas break, spring break, and then maybe just 3-day weekends here and there. So I will set up an auto feeder on longer breaks. I will set it to a very low notch of food. You just need just enough to keep them going. You don't want to cloud the tank with too much food and raise your nitrates and then have some catastrophe on your hands. So really, my advice would be to feed them every day or every other day, and going a couple days without it is not the end of the world. If you have any questions, just leave those in the comment section. I know I always get a lot of questions about how I feed my fish over the summer. It's really not as hard as you'd think, and fish are pretty resilient animals and they can go a decent while without food.
So last but not least, we're going to walk through 6 different cichlid aquariums that I have down here in my basement, starting with this 180-gallon aquarium. Okay, so with this 180-gallon aquarium, there are a few different needs to consider when feeding. The first is that I have a big Oscar and a big chocolate cichlid, which prefer to have bigger pellet sizes. And then I have some of the Geophagus and even the Severums that have smaller mouths and therefore need some smaller pellets. About 5 or 6 days a week, I will stick with big fella pellets from Extreme. I'll also mix in a few Cichlid Peewee pellets for some of the smaller cichlids. And then another running theme you'll see from my brothers and down here in my basement is that I love the krill flake from Extreme. They come in really big flakes that you can also crush up to give to smaller fish, which I'll also show. But overall, that mix of pellets and flakes is great. And then similar to my brothers, I also do frozen food maybe once per week, which is usually frozen brine shrimp or frozen bloodworms. Okay, so here's just a typical amount that I'll feed the 180. Again, this is only once per day. For a lot of adult cichlids, you don't really need any more than once per day, and you can also skip 1 day per week. It's actually usually good for the fish. So I have a couple big monster pellets, which will be for the Oscar and the chocolate cichlid. I have a lot of the big fella pellets, and then the krill flakes as well. Okay, and then my 150-gallon aquarium is pretty similar, although some of the fish are smaller and have smaller mouths, including the angelfish. So I actually go with more flakes in this aquarium than I do with pellets. Again, I'm heavy with the krill flakes. That's one of my favorite to feed this. They get that almost every day. And then I mix in a couple different types of flakes and even the Cichlid Peewee pellets, the smaller pellets, just so that they have that varied diet. The fish behind me are being a little crazy right now just because the electric blue acara have baby fish in here right now. They have bred yet again, and they are chasing some of the fish away from that area. So we'll see if we can feed them and get them natural behaviors to an extent. Okay, so now we head into my fish room where we're going to start with my 40-gallon breeder here. These are Gymnogeophagus terra purpura. These are cold water cichlids from Uruguay in South America. The temperature of this tank is only about 66 degrees, and that's actually preferred with these cichlids, which makes them very interesting, and I don't need a heater. I usually feed them smaller crushed up flakes or using these nano pellets, which are really great for sinking to the bottom and letting them scour the sand, sifting through and finding the pellets over time. These guys are still small, and maybe as they grow, I'll increase the size of the pellet that I'm giving them, maybe to the Cichlid Peewee size of 1.5 millimeters. And then again, all of my aquariums are usually fed 5 to 6 times per week, usually only once per day. But with some of my smaller cichlids, I'll increase to 2 to 3 times per day. So next we go above this aquarium to the 33-gallon African shell dweller tank. I usually give them a similar diet of nano pellets and crushed up flakes. They just go crazy for this, and because they're smaller and because they always have fry in the tank, I usually will feed them twice per day instead of the regular once. They all go crazy for food, and I like how some of the leftover flakes will float down to some of the areas of the tank that will have some of the babies living in the shells. Okay, so moving on next to my 75-gallon aquarium with Peacock cichlids, and these guys get a similar diet to Alex Haps, just on a smaller scale because they're smaller, and I go with the 1.5 millimeter pellets most of the time for these guys, and they just go crazy for food. One of the coolest parts about African cichlids, especially the ones from Lake Malawi, is how crazy they go for food. It's always fun to watch. And then down below this tank is actually my 10-gallon fry Growout tank. This has probably hundreds of electric blue acara fry, and they're still very small. They've only been free swimming for a couple weeks now, but I get a lot of questions about how to feed fry. A lot of people do live baby brine shrimp, and that's a great idea. I just keep it simple with these crushed up krill flakes. You can get them really fine and powdery just by crushing it up with your fingers. I'll also add in a little bit of nano pellets, and because I have 2 bristlenose plecos in this 10-gallon tank, I'll also add a little wafer here, which floats to the bottom and gives them a little more food over time. But these guys eat a lot, and because they're still very small and fry, I actually feed this tank 3 times per day, which is the only tank out of all of mine that I feed more than twice per day. I'll probably keep feeding them 3 times per day for a while, and then I'll dial it back to 2 times per day, and then once they become young adults or even adults, that's when I would go back to my regular schedule of 1 time per day, 5 or 6 days per week. So I hope you enjoyed the video and found that information helpful. If you're looking for links to any of the different foods we discussed today, you can find that down in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.